Chapter 64. The Necklace. ʿＡ'ishah and Salama had accompanied the Prophet on this expedition, and at a sunset halt 2 or 3 days after the forced march, an onyx necklace which ʿA'ishah was wearing came unclasped and slipped to the ground unnoticed. When she discovered her loss, it was already too dark to search, and she was reluctant to go without it. Her mother had placed it around her neck on the day of her wedding, and it was one of her most treasured possessions. The place was without water, and the Prophet had intended only a brief halt there. But now he gave orders to camp until daylight. The reason for the change of plan passed from mouth to mouth, and there was considerable indignation that the entire army was being delayed in such an inhospitable spot for the sake of a necklace. Some companions went and complained to Abu Bakr, who was deeply embarrassed and scolded his daughter for her carelessness. There was not a single well nearby, and the men had used up all the water they carried, intending to refill their skins and bottles at the next camp. Without water, they could not perform ablutions or pray at dawn. But in the last hours of the night, the verse of tayammum, earth purification, was revealed to the Prophet, an event of immense importance for the practical life of the community. If you find no water, then purify yourselves with clean earth, wiping therewith your faces and your hands. Quran 4:43. This divine concession soothed the rising discontent in the camp, and Usaid exclaimed, "This is not the first blessing that you have brought us, O family of Abu Bakr." When daylight came, the necklace was still nowhere to be found. But when all hope had faded and the army was preparing to move on, ʿA'ishah's camel rose from where it had been kneeling all night, and there, beneath it, was the necklace. One of the next camps was in a pleasant valley with long stretches of level sand. The Prophet's 2 tents were pitched, as usual, slightly apart from the others, and that day it was ʿA'ishah's turn to be with him. She later recounted how he suggested they have a race. "I girded up my robe," she said, "and the Prophet did likewise. Then we raced, and he won. 'This is for that other race,' he said, 'which you once won from me.'" He was referring to an earlier time in Mecca before the Hijrah. ʿA'ishah added by way of explanation, "He had come to my father's house, and I had something in my hand. He said, 'Bring it to me,' and I refused and ran away. He chased after me, but I was too quick for him." The clasp of ʿA'ishah's necklace was insecure, and at one of the last halts before they reached Medina, it slipped off again. This happened after the command to march had been given. She had withdrawn briefly from the camp to relieve herself. Upon returning, she and Salama seated themselves in their respective howdahs, closed the curtains, and unveiled their faces. Only then did ʿA'ishah realize the necklace was missing. Slipping back out under the curtain, she returned to search for it. Meanwhile, the men saddled the camels and brought them to the howdahs, fastening each in place. They were accustomed to the weight difference between the 2 women, one 30 years old, the other a slight girl of 14, and failed to notice that ʿA'ishah's howdah was now even lighter than usual, so they led the camels away without suspicion. "I found my necklace," said ʿA'ishah, "and returned to the camp, and not a soul was there. So I went to where my howdah had been, thinking they would miss me and come back. While I sat there, my eyes were overcome with sleep, and I dozed off." She was still asleep when Ṣafwān ibn al-Muʿaṭṭal passed by. He had lagged behind the army for some reason and had not camped the previous night. Noticing her, he came and stood over her. He had seen her before the command of veiling was revealed, and upon recognizing her he exclaimed, "Verily we are for God, and verily unto him we return. This is the wife of the messenger of God." His words woke her, and she quickly drew her veil over her face. Ṣafwān offered his camel and escorted her on foot to the next camp. At the army's arrival, ʿA'ishah's howdah had been removed from the camel and placed on the ground. When she did not emerge, they assumed she was asleep. But toward the end of the halt, after the men had rested, she rode into camp, led by Ṣafwān. That marked the beginning of a scandal that would soon shake Medina. The hypocrites wasted no time in spreading whispers, but for the moment, neither the Prophet nor ʿā'ishah nor most of the companions suspected anything. The spoils of the expedition were distributed as usual. Among the captives was Juwayriyah, daughter of al-Harith, the chief of the defeated clan. She fell to the lot of a helper who set a high ransom price for her. She came to the Prophet, who was that day in ʿā'ishah's apartment, to request help. ʿā'ishah recounted, "She was a woman of great beauty and charm. No man looked at her without being captivated. When I saw her at my door, I was filled with apprehension, for I knew the Prophet would see in her what I saw." Juwayriyah entered and said, "O Messenger of God, I am Juwayriyah, daughter of al-Harith, the leader of his people. You know the calamity that has befallen me. I've come to seek your help with my ransom." He replied, "Would you prefer something better than that?" "What is better?" she asked. "That I pay your ransom and marry you," he said. She gladly accepted his offer. The marriage had not yet taken place when her father arrived with a ransom consisting of several camels. However, before reaching Medina, he had admired 2 of the finest camels so much that he hid them in a pass in the Akuk valley, unable to part with them. He brought the others to the Prophet and said, "O Muhammad, you have captured my daughter. Here is her ransom." The Prophet responded, "But where are the 2 camels you hid in Akuk?" He then described the exact location where they were tethered. Al-Harith was astonished and declared, "I testify that there is no God but God, and you, Muhammad, are the messenger of God." 2 of his sons entered Islam with him. He sent for the 2 camels and gave them to the Prophet along with the rest. The Prophet then returned Juwayriyah to her father. She soon accepted Islam herself, and the Prophet asked for her hand in marriage. Al-Harith consented, and an apartment was prepared for her. When news spread that the Banu Mustalik were now related to the Prophet by marriage, the emigrants and helpers freed their captives who had not yet been ransomed. About 100 families were released. "I know of no woman," said ʿā'ishah about Juwayriyah, "who was a greater blessing to her people than she."